Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TCR Express. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry, and with me I have
Journal of Commerce staff writer Russell Hixson, broadcasting live from Maple Ridge, not my normal podcast studio, so the audio is slightly different.
but not bad. We're getting close to the dog days of summer. We're not quite there yet, but what have you got on the go, Russ?
Well, we have another high-speed transportation project story out of Alberta. I wrote recently about a project called Transpod, but there is another thing brewing, a high-speed rail project from, I think, essentially like the same kind of route from Calgary to Edmonton with maybe a stop in the middle. And it's being developed by Prairie Link, which is Aecom and EllisDon. And I spoke with someone over there at EllisDon, and it's in the early stages now. They haven't even decided kind of the alignment where stations might be or anything like that. But they're already in pretty deep discussions with government about the regulatory framework for it, discussions about talking to the various First Nations groups and different stakeholders to get some input on how they can do this project the right way. So they're coming along, and I think they should have kind of a more developed business case later this year. And that's coming along.
As somebody who grew up in Edmonton, I'm honestly flabbergasted it's taken this long for somebody to come up with a high-speed rail as an idea. Because, I mean, other than the fairly close, comparatively speaking, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and all the GO train stuff that's already there. This is a no-brainer. It's flat. They're 3 hours away from each other. They're vitally important to each other business-wise. It's shocking it's taken this long for this to happen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, they have high-speed rail is not a new thing. They have bullet trains all over the world. In Europe and in Asia, it's something that people have done before. And when you have like a really long, straight, flat area, it definitely makes it a lot more viable. So we'll see what happens with this.
And that's not a slight on the people participating in this. That's just North America has always had a thing where we just don't do high-speed rail for whatever reason. Probably because we're more car dependent, I guess. But it'll be interesting to see how this progresses because it makes a lot of sense.
To be fair, there's no regulatory framework. So it's like you have to, as they're developing this project and trying to figure out what they want to do, at the same time, the province is figuring out how they're going to regulate this new industry. It's a new industry. So you have to do all this initial work. So it is a lot. And I guess it might have been kind of daunting to do that in the past, but I think the will is there now.
Definitely, yeah.
And you're going to get cars off the road. You're going to get planes out of the sky and get more people on kind of a more efficient mode of transportation.
Anything else?
Yeah, I am scheduled to chat with a University of British Columbia professor who's an expert in forestry this week. And everybody has been talking about the price of lumber. And it's spiked again, and it's kind of due to the wildfires. My understanding is that. So I'm going to chat with this forestry expert, and he's going to explain to me some of the factors that are impacting lumber prices this summer, including kind of the horrible wildfires that we seem to be getting every year. I don't really have much more on it right now because I haven't had that chat yet, but we can expect that story late this week, maybe early next week.
As for me, I did an interview last week with Ben Brunnen. He's the Vice President of Oil Sands and Fiscal and Economic Policy for CAPP, which is the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. And they just put out a report about what the petroleum industry is doing to sort of mitigate emissions from their end of things. Not obviously, they can't do anything about cars or anything like that. But when it comes to the actual plants and the electricity going into those plants, they talk about carbon capture, which is an actual thing that's happening now, which, in fact, I raised this in the interview with him, which will be out Friday on the podcast, but in an article too, coming out, I think today, as you're listening to this, about how carbon capture, not in the industry itself, but amongst, the general population, people are like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll see, we'll believe when we see it. But now it looks like it actually is happening in a variety of different projects. They also talk about depending on electrification. So like if you got a project in BC, you can go with hydro, and that way you reduce the emissions coming into your system, and stuff like getting not just carbon being removed at the end of the combustion part of the process, but during the process itself, which apparently is a fairly efficient way to do it. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways they're doing this, which is interesting. It's not something you hear a lot about, and that'll be in the story and in the podcast.
Yeah, we've definitely heard a lot of support from both the BC and Alberta governments about wanting to progress their carbon capture industries. Because my understanding is in the past, it's just been a very, very expensive thing to do. And if you can kind of de-risk that, which I think is what some governments are trying to do, we're probably going to see a lot more of that. Because it gets
And they talk
more
about
support.
they talk about not just carbon capture, but other ways that the other technologies are using and will start to be using to reduce emissions. They made a point that Canada is a lot more transparent than other jurisdictions, by which I would assume they mean like Russia, Saudi Arabia, those kind of places,
Sure.
where you just don't get data. And so it's hard to say, oh, we're doing this much better than them, because you just don't have the data to work off of. But from what they can tell, they're doing better than a lot of people. Cool. Anyway, check out that story. And moving to news from the East, Daily Commercial News staff writer Angela Gismondi is working on a two-part series about a drywall and acoustics training program that's being offered in Thunder Bay, Ontario, for citizens from 9 First Nations communities in the area. The 16-week hands-on pre-apprenticeship program is offered by the Anishinaabe Employment and Training Services and Carpenters Local 1669. The first part covers the program itself, and for the second part, Angela speaks to the instructors and participants about their experience of the program. There have been several incidents involving cranes recently in Ontario and across the country. Ontario's Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development is holding a public consultation on improving health and safety requirements for tower cranes, and Angela will be interviewing someone from Gowling WLG discussing how construction firms can submit feedback. If you'd like to hear more of TCR Express or our Friday podcast, you can go to Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, or the Daily Commercial News or Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks.